Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. Living in a suburban neighborhood has its perks, but it also has its challenges. I have lived in my house for over 10 years and have always had friendly neighbors. We would often lend each other tools or even have a friendly chat on the front porch. But one day, everything changed. I came home from work to find a large RV parked in my driveway. At first, I thought that it was a mistake, but then I noticed that it had been there for days. I asked my neighbors if they knew whose RV it was, but no one seemed to know. I then realized that it belonged to my neighbor, Tom. Tom was new to the neighborhood and had recently moved into one of the houses across the street. At first, I thought he was a nice guy, but that all changed when he started to use his RV as a vacation home on my property. He would stay there for days at a time, have loud parties, and leave his trash all over the place. I tried to be diplomatic and asked him to move his RV, but he simply ignored me. I even went as far as to talk to his landlord, but they refused to do anything about it. That's when I knew that I had to take matters into my own hands. I started by looking up the laws on RV parking and discovered that it was illegal to park an RV on someone else's property for more than 48 hours without permission. Armed with this knowledge, I confronted Tom and told him that he had to move his RV. He got angry and threatened to sue me if I touched his property. Days went by and Tom was still parked in my driveway. He had even put up a canopy and started to use my electricity to power his RV. I decided that enough was enough and called the police. They came and told Tom that he had to move his RV. He did, but he only moved it a few feet over, still on my property. I realized that I needed to take more drastic measures. I contacted a local towing company and had Tom's RV towed away. Tom was livid and came over to my house, banging on my door and demanding to know what had happened to his RV. I calmly explained that he had parked it illegally and that I had it towed away. He threatened to sue me, but I knew I was in the right. A few days later, I received a letter in the mail from Tom's lawyer. He was suing me for the cost of his RV and for the stress that I had caused him. I couldn't believe it. I knew that I had done nothing wrong, but I was still worried about the outcome. The court case was long and stressful. Tom had a good lawyer and he was determined to make me pay. But after months of fighting, the judge ruled in my favor. Tom had to pay for the cost of his RV, and he was also ordered to leave the neighborhood. After Tom left, I was finally able to breathe a sigh of relief. But the stress of the whole situation had taken its toll on me. I decided to take a vacation and travel to Europe for a few weeks to clear my head. Update: since then, a new family has moved into Tom's old house, and they have been wonderful neighbors. We often share meals and even have a neighborhood block party once a year. I am grateful for the sense of community that we have, and I'm glad that the RV incident is a thing of the past. The next one is a pro-revenge story. This is my first post here, and I have been debating whether it belongs here or in petty revenge. If I have chosen the wrong sub, please let me know. About 15 years ago, when I was a kid living at home, we had a house with a vast backyard in the suburbs, and the neighboring property next to our driveway was a set of 3 attached rental flats, each with their front door facing our house. We were usually on good terms with most of our neighbors, including those next door. After the family in the middle flat moved out, an older single woman moved in. She was usually at home, so I doubted she had a job and wasn't particularly friendly. She kept to herself, which was fine, and never really acknowledged any of the neighbors. Whatever, that was cool. So one Saturday around midday, I was out back with the lawnmower, earning myself some pocket money. Since we had a big yard about 20 minutes in, I was about halfway done when suddenly a noise control officer knocked on the door. They told us to hurry it up, as they had received a complaint. Although they thought it was ridiculous, they had to say something. It was a bit stupid, but whatever. We weren't a loud family at all. No parties, screaming, anything like that. Over the next month, we kept getting visits from noise control. Always during the day, mind you. We would get visits for mowing the lawns, and even had a couple of complaints about my younger sister and me playing and hanging out in the backyard on weekends or in the afternoon after school. Again, we weren't all that loud. At the time, I would have been about 13, so more often than not, the boy next door and I would just be chilling on the swings, talking. Not loud, just being outside. We'd never had an issue with noise before. None of our other neighbors had ever had a problem, and we had never had noise control called before now. So we asked around. It was fairly obvious at this point that the snobby woman who had moved into the flat next door was making all the complaints. My father would always stock up on firewood in the summer to prepare for winter, and would have to chop it up himself. It was the first weekend of chopping for the year, and it was about 2 p.m. on a Saturday. He pulled out his old chainsaw, and it was on for about a minute and a half at most, before he realized the chain needed to be replaced. He turned it off, grabbed the axe, and proceeded to chop wood the long way. Next thing we knew, noise control showed up. The officers were sick of having to visit at this point, and were pretty friendly with Dad by now. It turned out that, yes, it was the new neighbor next door. It also turned out that she had been an issue for them for a while, and noise control was well aware of her stupid complaints from all of her previous addresses. Unfortunately, they were legally obligated to follow through with them. The following weekend, surprise, surprise, we got a visit after Dad had been chopping more wood with the axe. Because the chainsaw was out of action, he decided to give her something to complain about. A family friend of ours happened to be a truck driver. He drove a big rig, almost Optimus Prime level, up and down the country. He was back in town that weekend, so we gave him a call and he was keen to help us out. The next step was to warn all the other neighbors who were all fully on board because as it turned out, we weren't the only ones she was complaining about. The next weekend, around 9 a.m., we spent about half an hour getting this great big truck down our driveway. It was a pretty wide driveway, but it was a pretty wide truck too, so it was a damn tight squeeze. Having been good friends with previous neighbors, we were familiar with the internal layout of those flats. The bedrooms were directly next to their front doors, facing our driveway. We managed to get the cab of this massive truck far enough into the driveway to be directly next to this woman's bedroom. There was about 1.5 meters separating the truck and her wall. Perfect. On went the horn, loud as hell, terrifying our cats. On it went again and again. And then we kids got a turn. You could hear that thing a block away. We did it for about 10 minutes, went inside for a coffee, came back out and ran the horn one more time for good measure before our friend took off. This time there were no noise control officers, no complaints, nothing. She left the next week. The next one is a petty revenge story. I was a public employee for many years, having a middle management role for about 20 years. I reported to a department head, who reported to the mayor. I had a small staff, typically 5, 10 people who were mostly part-time. They rotated every few years, and I tried my best to make their time with me valuable. I helped them pad out their resumes, paid for trainings, and more. Tim was initially a decent employee, but quickly decided he was the greatest employee of all time. His overconfidence often led to mistakes or being overextended, and he needed to be bailed out. He was good at basic tasks, but had a hard time with math, grammar, and interacting with adults. Part of my job was seeking federal grants for small infrastructure projects. Think adding ADA benches to nature trails and curb cuts on old sidewalks or bridges on walking paths across ditches. I would write the grants and specs. The small staff would help administer the grant. Sometimes they would do the work. Sometimes they would oversee contractors. The grants were extremely clear and included a matching component. Sometimes we would add cash or equipment time or staff time. Sometimes we would have volunteer organizations match with labor. We were doing a bridge grant and I put the employee Tim in charge. It was phase 3 of 3 and we had a lot of experience. There were 21 bridges we were replacing in batches of 7. Tim just had to keep the process going with volunteer match labor hours. The process was practically automatic. All he had to do was show up with materials and stay out of the way. He did an adequate job, barely. I had to keep him on track to stay in spec. We are spending money to improve water quality. He wanted to improve recreation. We sent a lot of emails and texts about it. The department also used project codes to track grant spending. Each grant had a code, and it was very easy to code all the time and materials through the accounting department. The volunteers signed logs each day, and the process was pretty tidy. That fall, Tim continued to struggle with basic tasks, and eventually demanded a promotion for his outstanding work. He did not meet the very clear requirements for a promotion, government requirements, through his own laziness, despite being given opportunities to become qualified. Eventually, he became intentionally negligent, and put himself and others in danger. I called him into the office after an egregious incident and offered him the opportunity to resign or be fired. Resigning means he could be eligible for rehire in a different department. Fired means he is blacklisted from the city. He refused to resign, and so I terminated him. He seemed shocked. I think he thought it was a bluff or scare tactic. He thought he was a critical cog in the machine, but he was a thorn in my side. His dad is a well-known local attorney. I had pulled Tim's state criminal record, and on close inspection, it was clear Daddy was bailing him out throughout life. Assault charges dropped, DUI pled to a traffic violation, possession pled to an infraction. Tim decided to come after me. His first move was to call the federal division that oversees my grants and report fraud. They launched an investigation. My records were 1,000% immaculate. They called him into a meeting, and his proof of fraud was that he felt that the bridges should have been a lower priority, and the money would be better spent elsewhere, so the fraud was misuse of funds. But the grant specs were followed precisely by him. He had tried to divert funds, and I had stopped him. I had written evidence. The project he had accused on was the literal poster child for success and was included in a slideshow to the legislature on the success of the grant program. The feds and city powers were livid for wasting time. I had reams of perfect documentation. He was yelled out of the building. Then he filed a wrongful termination suit. He told his dad about the apparent mistreatment, and his dad filed. I contacted the city attorney and dumped hundreds of pages of documentation with a summary in his email. I was in City Hall when Daddy Attorney came slinking out of the legal department, apologizing for his idiot son. I heard from a mutual friend Daddy gave Tim a thorough reaming and withdrew the financial support that had allowed him to live on part-time work. He is doing better today, but right around the time his wife discovered his ongoing affair, the mistress got pregnant, and things got rough. The next one is an entitled people story. In 2020, I lost my home in a wildfire and was left with only what I could pack in a Ford Focus during the evacuation. I was renting a basement apartment in a country house, and most of my stuff went up in flames. I realized that while my car may have good gas mileage, it wasn't going to hold a lot of stuff or tow anything. My landlord evacuated his family in a big GMC truck with a fifth-wheel trailer. He had everything he needed from emergency food storage to backup vehicles. His wife drove another truck out, fully loaded with a trailer full of their stuff. They had everything they needed to survive, and more. This made me realize that I needed to be better prepared. I had to couch surf for a while and could never stay in one place for long because I was a guest and not a tenant. So I ended up living in a tent in a field with several other people who had also lost their homes to the fires. It was like a tent village set up by a local charity. The shelters were beyond full, and since it's a warm climate, tents were the next best option. I managed to get a used but decent-sized tent and basically furnished it like a tiny apartment with a cot, a small table, and some chairs. I even hosted a poker night in it a few times, though I made sure not to leave anything worth stealing when I went to work. I was still going to work almost every day, and even volunteering for extra shifts. I was saving money since I wasn't paying rent, and I made up my mind to keep saving to one day buy a truck of my own because if this situation with the wildfires or some other disaster ever happened again, I needed to be better prepared. A few months ago, I put down over a year's worth of savings to buy a used Chevy Silverado 1500 with a canopy already on it. It had a few dents, a big diagonal scratch across the hood, and the paint was a bit weather-worn. But so what? It had a good bit less than 100,000 miles on it and a list of recent repairs that included a new radiator. I had spent a year living as cheaply as possible to save as much as possible. I wanted a truck and a camp trailer in case the fires ever come back. Some people have called me a hoarder for picking up stuff off the side of the road and using it, but I don't keep all that stuff at my apartment. In fact, I keep almost minimal furniture. Some remark that my apartment looks like it was just moved into, as I still keep some of my stuff packed in boxes. I want to be able to pack and leave quickly if I have to, especially since the world only seems to be getting worse. I bought the truck, an ironically silver Silverado. I bought it from a man who looked to be in his 50s, and he said he had a bad back and couldn't use it anymore. He gave me a steal of a deal when I came to get it, dropping the price by $1,000 because he felt I was clearly in love with it. And I am. I'm very happy with the truck. She drives like a dream. A big heavy dream, but still a dream. And she was clearly underdriven by the previous owner, as it's still not at 100,000 miles. I still kept my old Ford Focus though, so my fuel costs wouldn't skyrocket. A few weeks after I bought the truck, I was out in the same general area where I bought the truck looking at a used camp trailer that I was possibly interested in buying. but it ended up being in such bad shape that I turned it down because it was beyond my skills to repair. Before leaving the town, I stopped to eat at a local diner. Great burgers there, by the way. As I was leaving after having dinner, I noticed a woman who looked to be in her 40s looking over my truck. I'm not going to use the term Karen to describe this person because I know two women named Karen, and they are both fantastic people, but she did have that look that people associate with the stereotype. I asked the lady what she was doing poking around my truck, and she gave me a side glare while demanding to know where I got it. I said I just bought it a few weeks prior. She rushed up to me and said I didn't buy it, I stole it. I told her no, I purchased it from the title owner, so that makes it mine. The lady then rifled through her purse to pull out a smartphone and scrolled through it. She showed me a photo of a truck in it, and I'll be a monkey's uncle. It was the same truck. The license plate and scratch on the hood were clearly visible. There was also a man in the photo, the same guy who sold me the truck. When I acknowledged this, the lady started yelling, see, and then demanded I return it to her. She held out her hand for the keys and kept saying to give it back. I told her I bought the Silverado fair and square off the guy in the photo and that it is my truck now. But she didn't let up. She went and sat on my bumper and called the police. She was heavily exaggerating while talking to the operator. I'm not sure what they call the person on the line when you call police. She refused to get off my truck, so I decided to wait it out for the police to show up. When the police arrived, I stayed completely calm, but the lady went off and started working up tears, saying that her truck went missing some time ago, and she finally found it. Then she demanded they arrest me for grand theft auto and get her truck back. I calmly unlocked the doors, got my insurance card, registration, and license to hand to one of the officers. I told them to just check my documents and they'd see I'm the legal owner, but the lady did not let up. She tried to run to the door of the truck I'd opened, but I relocked it before shutting it. She tried repeatedly to pull on the handle while telling the police to just arrest me already. One of the officers calmed the lady down while the other ran my information. He came back after a few minutes and said everything checks out. The lady was gobsmacked. She said that it couldn't be and demanded the police check again. Then she pulled out her phone to show more pictures of the truck. I pointed out that the man in one of the photos was the one who sold the truck to me, and I have no idea what relation the lady is to him. But he's the only person I bought the truck from. The police asked her who it was, and she said it was her soon-to-be ex-husband. They were going through a divorce. I pointed out when I bought the truck, her husband's name was the only one on the title. The lady yelled at me that he'd originally bought it for her, and it was missing one day after she came home. All I could do was shrug and say I did not know that. But her husband was the legal owner before me, and I bought the truck from him. The police told her that I was correct, and it is legally my truck now. The lady went from crazy to just very sad as she cried that it was her truck, and he sold it without her permission. I did feel sorry for her, and said to the police that they may want to do a wellness check on her or something. They said I was free to go, and they would handle the situation from there. When I was getting ready to leave, the lady yelled that she was going to follow me and find out where I live. But the two officers didn't let her do so. I left the parking lot and hightailed it on the highway out of there. Later, I contacted the guy who sold me the truck, and he admitted that the crazy lady is his soon-to-be ex-wife. She cheated on him for the second time, and it was the final nail in the coffin for their marriage. The truck was always in his name only, and that woman had signed a prenup when they married. So the divorce was not going in her favor. It's been months now, and that lady has not found me again, so I'm probably in the clear as long as I avoid the area I bought the truck in. Though for all I know, she's not even living there anymore since her husband divorced her. It was a crazy experience, but it made me grateful that I did my due diligence when purchasing the truck and had all the necessary documents to prove that I am the legal owner. The next one is an entitled parent story. I, 21F, made the decision to cut my stepfather out of my life completely. I also made the choice that he will not be seeing my daughter. Period. He was so abusive to me growing up and pretended the abuse didn't happen. He constantly gaslights me. He mentally and emotionally abused me. When I was having mental problems, my stepdad convinced my mother I was lying. He would call me names and make fun of me for not knowing how to do things I wasn't taught how to do. He would tell me how stupid I am. He would make fun of me for being autistic and bipolar. He would do or say things to purposely provoke me. He would say, "I wish you would hit me, fight me, what's up?" The thing is, I never challenged him to a fight. I would defend myself from further injury and he would tell everyone I hit him, that I started a fight with him. Keep in mind, I was a 5'5", 120-pound girl. He would physically abuse me. He would punch and slap me in the face, shove me against walls. He threw things at me. He told me that he wishes my attempt succeeded. He would always exclude me from family outings and going out places. I was excluded from everything. I got awards from an art show, and he claimed I was showing off and was angry that I was trying to hang them up inside my bedroom and demanded that I throw them away. He was upset because I had awards and my sister did not. He told me that it's not fair that I'm rubbing those words in her face because she didn't win any. My sister was his favorite, and anything she wanted she got. I was stuck with old clothes that didn't fit while my sister got new books, new makeup, new clothes, new shoes, you name it. She was the golden child. I was forgotten about. Every time I had plans with my mother, he'd force her to cancel them so she can go with him. She chose men over me. I had a daughter in February. I love her so much and want to protect her. My mother asked when I would let him see the baby. I made it clear that wasn't happening. He is angry I won't let him see her. He said to my mom, "If I can't see her, then nobody else can." It's not fair that she's excluding me when I provided food, clothes, and a roof over her head. She owes me. She was a difficult child to raise. I wasn't difficult. I had mental issues that weren't taken seriously or diagnosed. I went through a lot of trauma that my family denied even happening. My stepdad went on FB and talked about how I'm excluding him and that I'm an ungrateful brat. He had family reaching out to me to get over the crappy things he'd done. He will never see my daughter. He will never see me again. He is cut out of my life forever. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.